billions of people over thousands of years in Bharat and by extension in the entire subcontinent, Sri Ramayanam has always been a very important sacred scripture. However, of late, certain ideological groups have been trying to frame Sri Ramayanam as an epic that is oppressive of women, patriarchal, misogynistic, and whatnot. So let us try to critically evaluate and understand if Sri Ramayanam is really oppressive of women or not. And before moving any further, let me clarify my position in 3 important points. Number 1, no women appeasement is intended in this doc film. I stand for truth, and that's what I tried to articulate in this doc film. And the second one is no blind defense of Ramayanam. I have no interest to blindly defend Sri Ramayanam, no matter what. All I'm interested is to critically study, evaluate, and understand Sri Ramayanam if it is of any use to me as an individual and by extension to the society as well. This is not a culture where if you don't believe in a book, you'll be dead. No, Bharat has never been like that. This is a place for discussion, debate, and discourse. And that's what we're going to do with Sri Ramayanam in the context of feminism. And third and last thing is, I have no interest in doing a moral policing to compare modern society with what is documented in Sri Ramayanam in the frame of feminism, or for that matter, how women are being treated today versus how they were treated in Sri Ramayanam. That's not in my interest either. Just one question, one simple question. Is Sri Ramayanam patriarchal, misogynistic, and oppressive of women or not? There are hundreds of versions of Sri Ramayanam in many languages. But if one really wants to critically study, understand, and evaluate Sri Ramayanam, then the only source is the original version, Sri Valmiki Maharshi's Sri Ramayanam. And that will be our reference throughout this documentary. Owing to our objective of understanding whether Sri Ramayanam is misogynistic, patriarchal, and oppressive of women, the vantage point that we need to take is pick up all the important women characters in Sri Ramayanam and go one by one and try to understand what kind of role that they played in Sri Ramayanam. And that's exactly what we're going to do in next couple of minutes. Kausalya, Kaikeyi, Anasuya, Tara, Mandodari, and Sita. These are 6 most important women in the entirety of Sri Ramayanam. Starting with number 1, Kausalya, the mother of Sri Rama. Sri Rama is very much revered as an adoring brother, a loving husband, a reliable friend, a deadly warrior, a caring master, and most importantly, a servant king. The beauty of a tree might be in its branches, leaves, and flowers, but the real strength of the tree comes only from its roots. Similarly, all these great qualities of Sri Rama, which people adore, essentially comes from the roots under which he was raised by 3 people. His mother Kausalya, his gurus Vasistha Maharshi, and Viswamitra Maharshi. Just before he starts his 14 years of exile, Kausalya gives him all the needed moral strength to lead a dharmic life, even during the tough times. And that moral strength inculcated in Sri Rama by Kausalya is what made him a Maryada Purushottam. In Sri Ramayanam, Sri Rama is addressed as Dasharatha Rama or Kausalya Supraja Rama. A child is equally addressed with the name of his mother as well as his father. In fact, even today, in the daily morning rituals in any temple, that is of Sri Rama or Vishnu, the Suprabhatam starts with Kausalya Supraja Rama Purva Sandhya Pravartate Uttista Narasar Dhulam Kartavyam Daivamahnikam. The very first words, Kausalya Supraja Rama. These words demonstrate how important is the role of a mother, not just in the lives of normal people, but in the life of Ishvara as well. Kausalya stands as an ideal mother. Up next is Kaikeyi, the stepmother of Sri Rama. This is a very well-known incident where she asks for 2 wishes to Dasharatha Maharaj, seeking for the exile of Sri Rama and coronation of Bharata as a king. But in that conversation between Dasharatha and Kaikeyi, as it is documented in Sri Ramayanam and the reference is given here, it is very clear that during a war where Dasharatha Maharaja briefly fumbles and could not fight, that's when Kaikeyi takes his position, fights and wins over the war and saves the life of Dasharatha Maharaja. So that is a warrior queen who filled the position of her husband on a war field, fought and won the battle and saved the life of her husband. So let's again ask this question. Is Sri Ramayanam patriarchal, misogynistic and oppressive of women? Let's think about it. and that's how Kaikeyi stands as a warrior queen. Up next is Anasuya, wife of Atri Maharshi. During their exile, Sri Rama, Sita and Lakshmana meets Atri Maharshi and Anasuya and stays with them for a short period. Sati Anasuya plays a very important role in the life of Sita as well. This one is rather a very nuanced observation. If one reads the way Atri Maharshi introduces Sati Anasuya to Rama, Sita and Lakshmana, here is a sample reference from one of those slokas. Atri Maharshi feels very proud to introduce his wife Anasuya, who is highly revered as an ascetic and a great spiritual master. The way a husband takes pride in his wife in introducing her clearly demonstrates the relationship and the way a husband revered his wife. And most important of all, Sati Anasuya as a great spiritual master is an example how women pioneered in spirituality as well in Sri Ramayanam. Number 4. Tara, queen of Kishkindha and wife of Sugriva. When Sri Rama kills Vali and saves Sugriva, Sugriva promises Sri Rama that he will send his troops in search of Sita. But over a period of time, Sugriva totally forgets his promise, and that infuriates Sri Rama and Lakshmana. Sri Rama sends a message of warning via Lakshmana to Sugriva that if he does not keep his promise and deploy his troops in search of Sita, then their pact might stand broken. And that warning of Sri Rama scares Sugriva and he was unable to face Lakshmana. That is the moment when he takes refuge in his wife Tara and requests Tara to mediate and speak to Lakshmana. And Tara, as per Sri Ramayanam, is portrayed as a very intelligent woman, and she pacifies Lakshmana and averts the conflict between Sri Rama, Lakshmana and Sugriva. So that is a woman in Sri Ramayanam negotiating between two kings and averting a conflict with her diplomacy. And Lakshmana and Sri Rama trust the words of Tara and patiently awaits the actions from Sugriva in sending troops in search of Sita. So if a woman is capable of negotiating between two kings and averting a conflict, it essentially means that both the kings trusted in the words of a woman. So that is Sri Ramayanam for you. And let us ask this question again. Is Sri Ramayanam patriarchal, oppressive of women and misogynistic? Let's think about it. And that's Tara, who stands as an adept negotiator in Sri Ramayanam. Number 5. Mandodari, wife of Ravana. Mandodari demonstrates patience and perseverance as much as Sita does throughout Sri Ramayanam. Despite the unspeakable horrific crimes committed by Ravana, she endures all the ordeal and stands as a very patient wife, consistently and continuously advising her husband to stop his evil deeds and choose the path of righteousness. If one reads Sri Ramayanam, Valmiki Maharshi clearly portrays Ravana as an evil person, but Mandodari is absolutely portrayed as a very noble person, and that's Mandodari, who stands as a patient wife. Last, sixth, and most important of all, Sita. The character of Sita is deeply demonstrated throughout Sri Ramayanam. So we can't really pick handful of slokas. So I just did one sloka, which probably 98% of us might not know about Sita. And this sloka demonstrates what she really was. During that episode when she was alone in the Ashokavana and Hanuma meets her to deliver the message of Sri Rama, Sita inquires Hanuman about Sri Rama. And here are some of her words. While inquiring Hanuman about how Sri Rama and Lakshmana are preparing for the battle against Ravana, she says that, Hanuma, is Sri Rama and Lakshmana preparing for a twofold policy, that is conciliation and confrontation. That means building an army and attacking Ravana. It's a twofold policy. Is Sri Rama following a twofold policy? Because that is not going to work with Ravana. Sri Rama should be following a threefold policy, that is conciliation, dissension and confrontation. What she means by that is, if Sri Rama is just building an army and planning to attack Ravana, that is not going to work. Sri Rama should also create a dissension in the armies of Ravana. Sri Rama should try to break Ravana from within, and only then he can win the war over Ravana. And that is exactly what Sri Rama did by having Vibhishana on his side eventually down the line in the war. This episode gives us two very important insights about Sita's character. Number 1, her ability to strategize how to fight a war. And number 2, a freedom a woman has to speak on subjects which we mistake to be dominated only by men, that is politics and war. And if Sita is able to express her thoughts to Hanuman on how Sri Rama should fight a war, imagine that Sri Rama and Sita were still together and they had to fight another demon king. It is pretty clear that Sita would have given her advices to Sri Rama on how he should strategize his war and fight those battles as well. So if a woman is given such a pedestal where advices on how to fight and win over a war are being taken by the kings of those times, let us ask this question: is Sri Ramayanam misogynistic, patriarchal, and oppressive of women? Let us think about it. So that is a very quick account of 6 most important women characters across Sri Ramayanam. Now, I don't want to make a sweeping statement that Sri Ramayanam is not oppressive of women, it is not patriarchal, and it is not misogynistic. Then this video will become a propaganda video, which I don't want to make in that fashion. I want to leave this open-ended, enable you with certain facts, and you do your own reading and you form your own opinion, whether it is misogynistic, oppressive of women, and patriarchal or not. But while doing so, make sure that you rely on the primary sources, the original Sanskrit versions, or at the very least, translated into your own mother tongue, and you decide for yourself whether Sri Ramayanam is misogynistic or not. Over thousands of years, Sri Ramayanam has been shaping up the ethos of Bharat, but unfortunately certain malicious forces, and in this context we can happily call them pseudo-feminists, who try to malign Sri Ramayanam, twist and turn it and try to portray it in a negative light just to suit their agenda. So how can we not rebut such kind of people's false and fake narratives? So here are 3 most important fake narratives that we're going to bust, which these pseudo-feminists have been peddling. The first one is Surpanakha's assault. There is a fake narrative at play which sympathizes with Surpanakha, saying that a woman, just for expressing her love towards Sri Rama, had to face such a bloody insult where her ears and nose were cut, and eventually framing Sri Rama and Lakshmana as misogynistic and oppressive of women. This is absolutely a fake and false narrative because the actual scripture says totally different, and here is what it is. Surpanakha had no love towards Sri Rama, rather what she had was lust. The words I highlighted here, Rakshasi Kama Mohita. Surpanakha, overwhelmed with lust, advanced towards Sri Rama. It is purely for her sexual desires, and that is what Valmiki Maharshi's Sri Ramayanam clearly articulates about the intentions of Surpanakha. Precisely Aranyakanda 17th Sarga 7th Sloka, and for which Sri Rama refutes Surpanakha as he was already married to Sita, and that is when Surpanakha gets infuriated and charges towards Sita, saying that she would be killing Sita and want to eat her. And here the word specifically I highlighted, Bhakshayishyami Manushim. That's what she says, that she wants to kill and eat Sita. And eventually Lakshmana steps up in defense and attacks Surpanakha by cutting her nose and ears. Chicheda Karna Nasam. Those are the specific words. So these are the snippets from the primary source, Valmiki Maharshi's Sri Ramayanam. And anyone who want to comment or criticize Sri Ramayanam are happily welcome to do it. Just one thing, do it on facts. Do not twist it to suit your needs or agenda, and that is exactly what the pseudo-feminists have been doing. I will expose the pseudo-feminists in more detail in this specific incident itself, little further down in the video. For now, let's move on. Second incident from Sri Ramayanam that often the pseudo-feminists try to put forward a fake and false narrative is about Ahalya. Their fake narrative goes like this. For the sin of adultery committed by Ahalya, she was punished to become a stone, while Indra, who is the man involved in the same adultery along with Ahalya, walks scot-free. He is not punished. The punishment is given only for a woman. Again, if one reads the original Valmiki Maharshi's Sri Ramayanam, here are the slokas, exact slokas. The first one is where Gautama Maharshi, husband of Ahalya, curses Indra to lose his manhood. That is the curse given to Indra. And for Ahalya, he gives another curse to be invisible in form of dust and asks her to do a tapasya until Sri Rama arrives in the ashrama. So in this case of an adultery, man and woman both are equally punished. And there stands busted the false and fake narrative of pseudo-feminists that only women is punished but the man walks scot-free. Look, it is very easy to expose this pseudo-feminist. All we need to do is go to the original version, read about what it is saying, and that's it. It's a cakewalk to bust this pseudo-feminist agenda. Third, last, and the biggest bone of contention about Sri Ramayanam, Sita's agni pravesha. This one, people who are really devoted towards Sri Ramayanam also finds it very hard to digest. So reinforcing my position that I don't want to blindly defend Sri Ramayanam, here is the exact way how we should read this entire episode of Sita's agni pravesha. First and most important of all, choice of words, or rather the semantics. It is not Agni Pariksha, it is Agni Pravesha. Agni Pariksha means a test through fire, whereas Agni Pravesha means an act of suicide by entering into fire. There is a world of difference between these two terms, Sita's Agni Pravesha versus Sita Agni Pariksha. It is not a Pariksha, it is a Pravesha. She tries to commit an act of suicide by entering into fire. So let us get this straight. It is Agni Pravesha that we are dealing with. Now coming to the crux of the topic, why did Sri Rama refused to accept Sita? Sita was no ordinary woman. Sri Rama is finishing off his 14 years of exile and very soon he is about to be coronated as an emperor of the Ikshvaku dynasty. So naturally Sita will be the queen of the Ikshvaku dynasty, and if people are not ready to accept the woman who was unfortunately under the captive of a demon king like Ravana, that fear of how people might reject Sita as a queen of the Ikshvaku dynasty, that is the reason why Sri Rama could not accept her, not as his wife but as his queen. Yuddhakanda 114 Sarga 11th Sloka clearly articulates Jana Vada Bhayat, which means the fear of the talk of the public. That is what held back Sri Rama from accepting Sita back as his queen. And in the subsequent slokas, Sri Rama clearly and openly admits that Sita is flawless and the fault is on his own side, that Sri Rama is unable to take her back because of Janavada Bhayat, because of the fear of the public talk. And these are the words of Sri Rama towards Sita before she even entered into fire. While their conversation is still going on, this is what he says while rejecting her. Deepo netra turasyeva pratikulasi, which means for a diseased eye, even the light of fire seems to be very difficult to see. Same way, Sri Rama says that he who has a diseased eye, and this has to be understood in the above connotation, that because of the fear of the talk of the public, that is the disease that he is referring to as his disease in his eye. It is difficult for him to see Sita, who is as pure as fire. And these are the words of Sri Rama before even she enters into the Agni Pravesha. All the detailed explanation about Sita's Agni Pravesha is only for the people who are devoted towards Sri Ramayanam and would like to know in detail about it. But coming back to our guest for today's show, our pseudo-feminists. So how are we going to bust the false and fake narratives of these people? So here is the last nail in the coffins of false and fake narratives of these pseudo-feminists. At that intense moment of heated arguments between Dasharatha Maharaja and Kaikeyi, where she wishes for the exile of Sri Rama and coronation of Bharata as a king, Dasharatha vehemently tries to persuade her to withdraw her wishes, and when she refuses to do so, towards the end of their arguments, he proposes that let Sri Rama go on exile alone, while Sita will take his throne and rule the entire Ikshvaku dynasty as a queen. Ayodhya Kanda 37th Sarga 23rd Sloka. These are the words of Dasharatha Maharaja about his daughter-in-law Sita. Here is what he says. Sita the princess shall not proceed to forest. Sita will occupy the throne which was awarded to Rama. So here a father-in-law is ready to give his daughter-in-law the entire kingdom and make her a queen. Now where the hell is misogyny, oppression of women, patriarchy? Do me a favor. Just read these specific slokas if you can get your hands onto any Sri Ramayanam. And this specific sloka is a tight slap on men and women who ill-treat their daughter-in-laws today in our society. Sri Ramayanam stands as an eternal lesson for all such people. It gives us inspiration. Can you even imagine today a father who has 3 more sons, can he give the entire property to his daughter-in-law of the eldest son? It is just unimaginable even in today's parlance. But that is what Dasharatha Maharaja said in Valmiki Maharshi's Sri Ramayanam. And this sloka is also a very tight slap on the faces of men and women who don't want a girl child because once she grows up, she will become a financial burden. It is a slap on those kinds of people as well. Now, this one sloka teaches us tons of lessons and change our perception towards women in the society today. And unfortunately, this great grand epic is being framed as misogynistic, oppressive of women, patriarchal, and whatnot other nonsense. And finally comes the defining moment. What Sri Ramayanam thinks about a woman, these are the words of Dasharatha Maharaja. For every man, his wife is his soul. Sita is the soul of Sri Rama. And in the place of Sri Rama, Sita can very much occupy the throne and rule this entire earth. So that is Sri Ramayanam for you, my dear pseudo-feminists. So here is another nail in the coffin to expose this pseudo-feminists. Here are 2 very important slokas that I took from Sri Ramayanam and put it side by side. A pseudo-feminist is someone who can accept the first sloka but cannot accept the second sloka, where both essentially comes from Sri Ramayana. As per the first sloka, it means that the wife of a man is his soul, and you cannot expect a person to live without his or her soul. So that's how important a wife is in the life of a man. And in the second sloka, it says that no matter how good or bad a husband is, for a wife, her husband is like God to her. See, in one line, if I really have to say, Sri Ramayanam is neither patriarchal nor matriarchal. It just gives a perfect balance of how a man and a woman should lead their lives together in this world. Now the problem is, these people with malicious intentions, the pseudo-feminists, they pick up the references like the second slokas and say that, see, a woman is subservient to a man and this is a misogynistic epic. So they selectively choose these kinds of second slokas and ignore all the first kind of slokas. And they try to spin a false and fake narrative saying that it's a misogynistic and all that nonsense. Now let me show you how a classic example of a fake narrative from the pseudo-feminists look like. Here is an article published in the Deccan Chronicle. And before moving any further, I have nothing against Deccan Chronicle or for that matter any media house. I don't support or oppose any kind of media house or political parties and all that kind of stuff. I am just talking about this specific instance, this article published by Deccan Chronicle, only about this article. All the red lines are fake and false narratives. They are not present in Valmiki Maharshi's Sri Ramayanam. And what's in green is the only thing that is present in Valmiki Maharshi's Sri Ramayanam. And here are the real references that I gave towards the right as opposed to the fake narrative published by Deccan Chronicle. Here in their article, they say that Surpanakha expressed her love towards Sri Rama, while in Valmiki Maharshi's Sri Ramayanam, it clearly is written that Rakshasi Kama Mohita. Kama Mohita means overwhelmed with sexual desires. And Deccan Chronicle writes that if an ugly man can have a beautiful wife, then why not an ugly woman like Surpanakha have a beautiful husband like Sri Rama? What they forgot totally is that Sri Rama is a married man and not a single man in first place. And second most important thing what they forgot is Surpanakha tried to assault Sita, and in that act of defense, Lakshmana had to cut her ears and nose. But there is no mention of all these facts in this entire article. And I was really amazed when I read this article. It says that Sri Rama and Lakshmana oppressed Surpanakha to keep her inferior to them, and Surpanakha could not stand the patriarchal domination. Logic and rationality will rest in peace. Anyways, this is how a fake and false narrative from a pseudo-feminist agenda would look like. Again, I have nothing against Deccan Chronicle or for that matter any media outlet. This is just a classic example of how these pseudo-feminists are spewing venom by twisting the facts to suit their agenda. That's my only point. All in all the great women characters in Sri Ramayanam stand as great inspiration in many facets to all the people, men and women, in today's world. And with this short doc film, my objective is to bring forward these facts towards everybody and counter this pseudo-feminist agenda that is working against Sri Ramayanam and the people who revere it as a sacrosanct scripture. This is a culture which says Matru Devo Bhava and then Pitru Devo Bhava. Sri Ramayanam is neither patriarchal nor matriarchal. It just gives simple lessons for men and women how to lead a dharmic life. And like it or not, for billions of people over thousands of years in Bharat, Sri Ramayanam has been the cultural backbone and shaping the ethos of Bharat and will continue to do so no matter how many negative forces try to work against it. Sri Ramayanam is eternal. Jai Sri Ram. And as always, thanks for watching.